Hello, everyone. It's Tool Time Tuesday. It's session 106, and it's also National Medical Librarians Month. So Leslie and I decided that we were going to do something on health information because this is kind of near and dear to our hearts. It's part of what we do, but we also thought that it would just help you, whether or not you work in a clinical setting, like as a consumer of health as well, it would help you as well. So please feel free to add information to the chat or ask questions and things like that as always. And we had to do a nerdy pun for boost your way to health literacy. Wes would be so proud, Leslie. He would. So I'm Larissa. This is my colleague Leslie, and we're from the library. I think you guys know that. You can find us on Inside if you type in library or just Google us. We're here to answer questions and to help. I wanted to remind you that the adoptive family is going on right now. This is a really important for our patients. It's a great way to help support the patients. You don't have to donate very much, but it helps them have a better holiday season. It's a nice way to give back to our patients, and it goes directly to the family. So that's wonderful. So you can find the adoptive family information on Inside. And I'm also going to include it in the slide, which I'll share with you. Also, Leslie wanted me to be sure to remind you that the time change begins on Sunday. So this is important to remember. Hopefully you're not late to anything or you don't have any issues with sleep. So let's talk about health literacy and what health literacy is. So this is an infographic from our patient education department. If you weren't familiar with patient education, they're an amazing group of people, and they help communicate with our patients and share information with our patients. And you may think, like, why is this important? I can Google things. We can all Google stuff, but the important thing is trying to find the right information and the best information, and information that is at a level that we can understand, that we can interpret, to help us make the best decisions as patients, as caregivers. And as the infographic says, 9 out of 10 adults lack the skills needed to fully manage their healthcare and prevent disease. I think we've all been in an appointment or with someone at an appointment, and the doctor or the nurse is talking and we're like not getting all of the information. And there's so many factors that can contribute to this: language, or just vocabulary, or our reading level. People have different reading levels. So I'm going on and on about this. You can learn more from patient education in general about what health literacy is. So we wanted to talk about evaluating information, and then we're going to give you some actual tools for health information as well. We've talked a little bit about evaluating information before, but it's really important to think about this every once in a while. So some best practices. We're starting with best practices instead of ending with them. When you're looking at a news story or any sort of information on the internet, or just any sort of, even in any scientific article, you always want to consult more than one source. I think it would be nice if we could look at one article and get all the answers, but it's just not reality. So we always have to look at more than one place to make sure we're getting all the information. It's easy to identify terminology you don't know. In Google, you can type in define with a little colon after and whatever the term is, and it will try to define the term for you in Google. Of course, there's a lot of amazing dictionaries out there as well, but just a shortcut in Google, you can type in define and then the word. Be sure to check your biases when you're looking at information. I think we've all read a headline and sort of trusted it immediately, but sometimes you have to think a little bit more critically about, okay, well, what are the facts of this information, and how do I determine, what they're really trying to say? So check your biases when you're reading, if you can. Use respected authoritative tools, and we're going to talk about how sometimes that can be a challenge, but there is a tool to help you with this. We're going to talk about the Crabs framework, which is going to help you identify your sources, whether they're good or maybe not as good. And don't forget that as a consumer, as a patient, you can bring this information you find to your doctor and discuss it with them. Or write down your questions ahead of time. It's okay for you to ask questions. And you're going to work with your information plus their expertise to try to make the best decisions for you as a patient. You don't have to trust them 100% implicitly without, doing your own research. You're going to combine those two things together to have the best outcome. I hope that made sense. So a couple things to think about when you're reading things online is there's a lot of clickbaity titles out there. So if it's clickbaity, you might want to take pause. Don't just trust the title. You may have to dig in and read a little bit more. You do need to dig in and read a little bit more. I have read a clickbaity title and fallen for it before. We all do. Just be aware that there's always more to the story. When you are looking at an article, you always want to consider who's written the article. Do they have a science background or a background in the field in which they're talking about? This is not to discredit writers who, there's lots of writers who can write about other fields of study, but all that is to say that maybe if they're not an expert in that area, you may need to dig in and find some more information. They're trying to give you the best overview they can give you based on their information. You may have to dig a little bit deeper. So think about who the writer is and whether you want to seek out more information. This is kind of reiterating what I said before, but we've all seen headlines where it says something like, eggs are good for you. And then, a month later, there's a headline that says eggs are bad for you. News stories are focused on one study usually. So you have to look at the more than one study or more than one piece of information to find the real answer. Science is really supposed to be a body of evidence, not just one study. We don't make our decisions based on one study. So while it can be jarring and kind of frustrating, I've heard many people, and I've thought it myself before, now we can't eat this, or now we can't do this. But that's not what they're really saying in that story. They're just saying what one study found. And there's probably a lot more information out there in context. Also, you want to look for text like sponsored. You've probably seen this more and more. Even in our major newspapers, there's a lot of sponsored content, and it can be misleading trying to sell things to us. So just look for any sort of clues that an article is sponsored as well. So we wanted to show you, there's a chart called the Interactive Media Bias Chart. Leslie actually found this. It's kind of interesting to look at if you like data. It will, for free, you can look at the top 250 news sources, and it'll kind of tell you where that news source skews, whether it skews, to being a little bit more fact-focused or more opinion-focused, whether there may be some misleading information in it. It's just a way for you to check out a publication and see if it maybe is leaning in a direction one way. Then maybe you want to look at another publication that's leaning the other way to see what the counter argument is. So it's just kind of a cool source you can check out, free to use. There is a paid for version, but it goes way more in depth, and I'm sure most of us don't need to do that, or don't want to do that. Don't forget to do some fact checking as well. So there's lots of fact checking websites, and we've listed a few here. I think most people have probably heard of Snopes. A lot of them are trying to debunk misinformation or disinformation. The other thing you can do is, a lot of times news sources will allow you to report something that you think maybe is misinformation or disinformation. So you can actually report something on your side and say, I don't think this is legit. And then they can choose whether they want to dig a little deeper into that or not. But if you're reading something and you're not sure, like it sounds too good to be true, or it sounds a little crazy, a little out there, you can check out one of these sites or more than one of these sites and see if they've done any additional fact checking to determine whether the information is legit or not. Any questions so far? Or
none in chat.
Okay. So we wanted to show you this CRABS framework. There's lots of different frameworks for determining credibility of a source. This one's just cute because it's a crab. But what the Krabs framework asks you to do as a reader is to consider, when you're reading something, possible conflicts of interest. And we're going to show you an example of this. Like the author, do they have a conflict of interest? Do they have an interest in getting you to believe that this, herbal supplement is the best for you, whatever it is? They also suggest that you look at the references, make sure that the evidence, there's evidence to back up what they're saying. Sometimes people don't post any references, and it's common in news to not post references, but that makes me question a little bit more. Are you able to see the screen, Leslie?
I am.
Okay. Someone lost their screen. Sorry. Okay. So check your references. If there are no references, that probably means you want to search a little bit further. Also, just to let you know, as a librarian, when I've looked at reference lists, sometimes the references don't trace back to the information that they state in the article. It happens. They just copy a reference from a previous article and they assume it matches what they're saying, but it doesn't always match. So you also want to take a look at the author, make sure that they are legit in that field, somebody that is authoritative. You want to look for buzzwords. So anything with buzzwords should make you take pause and say, okay, what are they trying to get me to feel here? Are they trying to get me to feel angry or sad or whatever the case may be? And then scope of practice is the last thing. So I think that specifically for social media, there's a lot of people that are pretending to be or assuming, you might assume, are authoritative in their area. So be aware that anybody can say anything about anything pretty much, but that doesn't mean they are the authority on that topic. So if they're trying to sell you something, you need to look a little harder. One thing that I always do if I feel like I'm getting influenced on social media is I'll go search Reddit sometimes and see what people say about, and this is for really generic things like, this is the best, skincare thing you could ever buy. And then if you go look on Reddit, people will say, oh, no, it's not really as good, or here's a good dupe that's cheaper. Or so it's just something to keep in mind, that sometimes people are authoritative on social media because they're trying to sell you something. Do you want to add anything to this, Leslie? Okay, somebody said, I love the travel with one bag subreddit. Reddit, I didn't used to use Reddit, and because it is opinion, okay? Be aware, Reddit is opinion. But what I like about Reddit is that people say all sorts of things on there that can give you just a different viewpoint, something you didn't think about, a different opinion, a different point of view, a different perspective. And so sometimes it just breaks me out of the influence feel that I'm having of, oh, I really need to buy this thing, or I really need this thing. It would make my life better. Sometimes just going and looking up more information is helpful to determine, oh, that's really not as important as I thought it was. This is true of health information too. Keep in mind that things like supplements are not, what am I trying to say? Leslie, are you there? I think she stepped away for her puppy. They're not regulated by the FDA. Supplements are not regulated by the FDA, so they can vary in quality quite greatly. So there's a lot of things that you have to research yourself to make sure that they're working the way that you think that they should. Okay. We want to give you a couple of examples. So I don't want you to mistrust information out there. I don't want you to feel like everybody's lying to me, because that's not true. I don't think most people are intentionally trying to lie. But we did want to show you there are a few sources that will uncover whether studies are maybe as legit as you think they are. So one that Leslie pointed out to me was this one called foodpolitics.com. I think it's run by a microbiologist. And she'll post about a specific food study, and then she'll tell you if there's a conflict of interest or something kind of odd about the study. So this is really helpful because, for instance, in this example, These authors are stating that refined sugars, if you substitute refined sugar with maple syrup, that it's all good. Your glucose levels are fine. But if you look way down, and it's in French, in the conflict of interest, this is actually funded by a maple syrup group. So their interest is in getting you to eat more maple syrup. I mean, it's delicious. I'm cool with it. But can we 100% trust that their study was not biased in any way? That's the question you ask for this. So if you looked at this, you might think, well, maybe I just won't use regular sugar. I'll use maple syrup and I'll be fine. My glucose will be fine. But in reality, there may be some bias here, or there's some definite bias here. So here's another example. So this one was pretty big. I think it was like
2018.
Oh, I felt like it was more recent than that, but I think it's because they've been called out a couple of times. This particular group, and they're at Harvard, they actually produce studies talking about how beer's not that bad for you. Like you can drink beer, it's not that bad for you. And, I don't know. I think you can drink some beer. Well, it's not my area of expertise, but what was discovered was that the authors were being funded by Anheuser-Busch. So it was in their best interest to tell you, drink all the beer you want. And I don't think they exactly said that, but they were doing quite a few articles and they were being asked to be on different panels and boards talking about how beer's not that bad for you. And I think it's probably more complicated than that, right? So that's just another example of how sometimes, this was in the Washington Post, but it was on a lot of news outlets at the time. These are some big examples of how sometimes science does get debunked. Again, I want to remind you that this is not the majority of science, but this is just to remind you that you might need to dig a little bit further and make sure that there's no conflict of interest or issues with this study as well, or keep an open mind. Okay, so that's the information piece that we really wanted to get to this week. But now let's talk about the fun stuff, which is the tools. I mean, that's the more fun stuff to me. So we're going to talk about some quick answer tools for health information. So I know what you're thinking. You can just Google it when you have a question, and you can just Google it if you'd like. We've all used Dr. Google before, but you've probably also been really scared by Dr. Google before as well. So we're going to talk about some good places you can go to get reliable health information. Number one, this is geared towards our patients, but again, we have the patient education department. They create materials for our patients that are written at a level that are readable to the large community at large. And those materials are available on Inside. You can get to them, and I'm going to give you those links. There's also the Learning Center. If you're not familiar with the Learning Center, our patients can go to the Learning Center to learn more information about their cancer diagnosis, about nutrition. They have great books just on cancer survivor stories, but they also have staff on hand who can help them navigate the information and find what they're looking for at that time. Like when you get a big diagnosis, you don't always want all the information. Maybe you just need a piece of information so you can get through today. And the Learning Center has librarians and health education specialists who can help the patients navigate that. So remember that these sources are there for the patients, but you can always stop by and visit as well and take advantage of that information as well. For drugs, so when you get prescribed something, I hope that all of you look it up to see, is this the right thing for me? And there are a couple tools that you can use to look up more information. So the drug information tools out there, typically, they're going to look a little dry to you because they're going to give you things like the generic and the brand name. They're going to give you dosing instructions, which could be helpful. But they're going to go in deeper. They're going to tell you what possible side effects you could have with that by taking that drug. Many of them have an interaction checker. So you as the patient can go in and make sure that this pill is not going to interact with any other medications or supplements that you're on. There's a pill identifier. So if you find a pill somewhere, you can go in and say, what is this pill? And it will help you identify what pill it is. I have dropped pills before, and they're all the same colors and shapes. And then there's a drug comparison. There are drug comparison tools. So one that's easy for you to get to is drugs.com. There's also the FDA website, but it's a little more aggressively sciencey. Drugs.com is an easy way to look up a drug and get some of this overview information. Here at MD Anderson, we have UpToDate. UpToDate allows you to look at something called LexiComp. That's what our pharmacists use, and it gives you all this overview information as well. We also have Micromedics, and there's actually a ton of drug information tools. So you might wonder, why do the pharmacists need more than one drug information tool? It's really complicated. Like, drugs are complicated. Dosing is complicated. The way you administer it can be complicated. So they may need to look in more than one place to get all the information they need on that specific drug, or get the specific information they need about that drug. So this is a good example of, like, if I look in LexiComp, I'm going to get specific information. If I look in Micromedics, it is different. They have some different information in there. But for most of us, using something like drugs.com is super easy to look up medication. Does anyone use any other tool for looking up drug information, like when you get a prescription? Does anyone do that? Look up their drugs to see what's going to happen, what side effects they could expect? I always do this.
Me too. I do this for my parents. That's who I do
this for my parent as well. So there are, it gets more complicated the more things you take. Yes, if you can ask your pharmacist when you pick up your medication for more information. That's a great suggestion. Okay, you read the literature that comes with the prescription. Okay. Yeah, and you can just Google it to get more information. All right. I'm glad some of you are looking it up. I think it's just important. The interactions thing alone can be really important to see if this medication is going to interact with something else. Yeah, a lot of times the pharmacist will ask you, do you want to talk to a pharmacist? If they're in a hurry or you're in a hurry, sometimes you turn it down, but I have had really good conversations with the pharmacists. So that's a very, very good point. Thank you. There's also just disease or information tools, just overview tools. So again, you can Dr. Google it. I don't know how many of you have Dr. Googled it, and it's always cancer every time. That's just a silly joke, but you can always go down a rabbit hole and it can become something terrible when it's not. Yes. So you can use a couple of authoritative resources to look up just symptoms, prognosis, diagnosis, treatment overview, pronunciation. I love the pronunciation ones. Mayo Clinic is a good place to look. Medline Plus is run by the National Library of Medicine. It's extremely comprehensive and it has information in multiple languages, which is nice. CDC has good information. And then again, you can use, as an MD Anderson employee, you can use UpToDate. UpToDate's really, the majority of it's written for clinicians, but there are patient education sheets in there. And UpToDate's very thorough. So it's going to give you a lot of information, and maybe even some that you're not ready for. So keep that in mind as well. Yes, I think Diana mentioned there's an FDA website to see if the drug has effects on CYP proteins, transporters. It gets complicated. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Oh, there's a pharmacy storefront page. Do we have pharmacists? Are you guys pharmacists in here? We should have just let you do this whole thing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Okay. So UpToDate's another place that I always look when somebody gets a big diagnosis, because I want to get a good overview. I want to know what the clinicians are looking at. Like, what is my doctor looking at? What are they reading? What are they, I know they're going to use their expertise and their knowledge and their team to come up with a treatment strategy, but I kind of want to know where they're coming from too. So there's also some complementary and alternative medicine tools. So a couple people have mentioned supplements, herbal supplements. And I think there's a big trend to think that because it's natural, that it's totally safe to take. But natural things can interfere with your medications as well. And as we said before, supplements are not always regulated. They can have fillers and different things in them. So if you want to look up your information a little bit more in depth, these are two sources that I would recommend. There's the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. This one's free for anyone to use. You can look up alternative treatments too, like acupuncture and yoga, but you can also look up supplements, essential oils, things like that. And then there's natural medicines. So the library subscribes to natural medicines. It's a little bit more in depth. You can actually look up brands of specific supplements. If you have questions on how to use it, you can always reach out, and I will do my best to help you use it. Our integrative medicine department uses this quite a bit. So just remember that sometimes, even though it's natural, it may not go well with what other treatments you have, what other medications you have, and always discuss with your doctor, of course. It's worth looking at. And then we wanted to mention some mental health resources as well. So if you need to get an overview of a mental health topic, there's the NIH has the National Institute of Mental Health. The CDC has a mental health website. There's lots of stuff on EAP if you need help for yourself or your colleagues. And I also wanted to mention that we have the DSM library. So this is really meant for clinicians, but we have the DSM texts available for diagnosing mental health, helping with mental health diagnoses. So that is available for anyone to access. So anybody can take a look at it if they want to dig in more. So I think the question is always, how much information do you want when you find something out? So let's see. Are you saying we can get to natural medicine site by going through the research medical library? Yes, let me show you. You can, I don't know if you can type it in here, but if you go under popular resources to databases, we have a drugs section. I think we have an integrative medicine section too. But if you go under drugs, it has most of these things in here. And I think that we have natural medicines in here as well. They changed their name to NatMed Pro. So this is available for anyone at MD Anderson to use. It has a lot more information in it than I can even describe to you because I'm not a clinician, but it is available for people to access and use. Oh, you can go through the pharmacy page too. I love the pharmacists. You guys are like, and the pharmacy techs, you guys are great. So one patient asked about adding Chinese herbal supplements. He ended up going with acupuncture to avoid the drug interactions. Yeah, so we do have the integrative medicine department that can help patients navigate alternative or complementary treatment suggestions, just to make sure that it doesn't interfere with their current treatments. That's good to have. Okay, so we're almost at time, but I wanted to ask if anybody feels comfortable. How do you know which sources to trust, or which sources do you seek out? I'm going to stop recording so we can discuss comfortably.